Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Opfer, and what I have for you today is our first presentation on public speaking. This is material from Chapter 1, which is an introduction to public speaking. So I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint slides, and then I'm going to talk and allow you to look at the slides while I'm talking. All right. So now we want the slideshow. Here we are. And oh, okay, so I put my face at the bottom here. Okay, so this is our topic and introduction to public speaking. So welcome. Alrighty, so here are our goals or our objectives for this presentation. So after you read the chapter or listen to this presentation, you'll be able to articulate the 3 reasons why public speaking skills are important. You'll also be able to describe the difference between the linear and the transactional model of communication. You will be able to list, define an example, give an example of each of the components of communication, and you will identify the 11 core public speaking competencies. Finally, you will be able to differentiate the 4 major types of delivery. So the 3 benefits of public speaking, what are they? The first is public speaking benefits your personal life. The second is that public speaking benefits your professional life. And the third is that public speaking benefits your public life. So let's take a look at each of those. Public speaking benefits your personal life. Well, you never know when you'll be asked to give a speech at a wedding, at a funeral, at other kind of special occasion, anniversaries, big birthdays. You could be asked to speak in your personal life at times that you don't expect. So if you have studied it and practiced it and know the skills, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable and you're going to know how to put that speech together. So that's going to be very helpful to your personal life. Another way it benefits your life is your professional life. So, how can it benefit your professional life? You might be thinking, well, I don't want to be a public speaker. That's not my career. But the truth of the matter is that any place where you work, if you are assigned to a leadership position, you will probably be having to do some public speaking. And by that, I mean you'll have to talk to groups, and you might have to talk to a large group or a small group. You might even have to address everyone in your organization. And there's different kinds of speeches that you do at work. Sometimes there are speeches to inform, sometimes there's speeches to persuade because you want people to adopt a policy that you're interested in, or a thing about work, or a new way of doing things. So all of these reasons are why it can be really helpful to study public speaking for your professional life. And then finally, it benefits your public life. Now, you might think, well, I'm not a celebrity and I have no desire to be one, or I'm not a politician, but lots of people can have a public life without being in either of those 2 roles. Let's say that there's some toxic waste that's getting dumped in your community and you're upset about it and you want to do something about it. Or let's say that you want to get involved in the PTA because your kids are in the school and you want things for your kids that maybe your school doesn't have, or you want to improve things. Or let's say you're angry about something that's going on in your community, right? I had one student who was really upset that she lived in a house up near College of the Canyons because that's where I was teaching, and her heat was really expensive, and the association that ran the neighborhood didn't allow them to put solar panels on the roof to have solar heat, which would have saved her so much money. So she got involved in organizing the neighbors to try to change that. So public means that you're involved in any kind of public, your community, anything that's outside of your home or your work, where you're engaging with people is a type of public. So these are the 3 ways that public speaking can benefit you in these different spheres that you might be involved in. And lastly, I just want to say that at work, even if you don't have do a speech, whenever you get called upon to have to talk to your boss or you get called on in a meeting, if you know how to organize your thoughts effectively and how to use your voice and your body in a way that you can express what you want really clearly and sometimes persuasively, you're going to be more effective, even if you don't have to do speeches, because you're going to have to speak in your job. And the people who communicate well are the people who are recognized and promoted to leadership. And so it's it's going to help you in your career, no matter what you're doing. All righty, so let's move on to the next slide here. Okay, so here's your first pop quiz list of 3 benefits of studying public speaking. So try to do that without looking at the previous slide. So this will help you remember it and it'll help you with the quiz. All righty. Now we're going to move on to looking at 2 models of communication. So the first model is a linear model. So you'll notice how there's a straight line going across the page, and the person who is the sender is the person speaking and giving the message. The channel is how or where the message is traveling. So if I'm in class talking to you, then the channel is the classroom. If I'm TV, I'm on TV, right? Then the channel is the TV in the airways for the TV. Or if I'm doing a podcast, the channel is through the internet. So there's different kind of channels. And then you have the receiver. So the benefit of this model is it allowed people to study communication, looking at the sender, the source of the communication, and the channel. So if there was a problem in communication, you could try to figure out, well, is it the way that the sender created the message or the way they said it that it wasn't clear? Or was there a problem in the channel? Was there too much noise, right? Did this connect for some other reason? And then finally, you have the receiver. Was the receiver actually listening? Or did the receiver understand what was being said? So that was the benefit of the linear model to help us to kind of analyze when communication was effective or ineffective and where it could be breaking down. And also what we could do to improve our communication, right? By focusing on those 3 elements. Well, that was seen as very limited because there's more going on in communication than what you can see in this model. So people started to improve it and develop it. And one of my professors, Dean Barnland, was one of the first to develop what's known as the transactional model. So the transactional model is a model that recognizes there's multiple things happening when we communicate, and we still have we have communicators, but we don't designate one as the sender and one's the receiver, because we're engaged in conversations and people are sending and receiving messages. Even if I'm talking, if I'm in the classroom with you, I'm going to be receiving messages that you're sending non-verbally. I can read your facial expressions, right? I can see your body language. So it's not just a one-way street the way that the the first model that I showed you was, right? So you have on this model, you have the 2 communicators, and the one person, at different points of time, people can switch roles as senders and receivers. And even that's even true TV today. You can often you can be sending text messages, right, or other messages online to television stations. And we have shows like America's Got Talent where the audience votes, right? So the communication is not just one way in most situations in society today, not anymore. And so here you have the channel still. So you have the 2 communicators, but they're both senders and receivers. They're not designated as one or the other, but they're both. And then in the channel, you have the message. So the message is what's formulated. So it can be talk, it can be oral messages, and it can also be visual. And even in well, those are and that's true both online in media like television and film, and also face to face. But when it's face to face, you can add more to the messages. So smell and touch can be added to it that you can't see that you're not going to have in film or television or podcasts. And then you have um, what's known as the worldview. So, what's going on inside people's heads? All the things that you've learned your whole entire life, all the values, the attitudes, the experiences, they form these different types of thinking that are labeled here as axiology, cosmology, praxeology, epistemology, and ontology. So these are different ways of viewing the kinds of things that people think about. So ontology is the theory of being, and axiology is a theory about practice, like what should we be doing? Epistemology is theories about knowledge, and cosmology is a theory about the creation of the world. A lot of our conflicts are stem for differences. A lot of our controversial conflicts, in particular, right? So, the conflict about abortion is a conflict around ontology, like when does life begin? That's a theory of being, and that's the basis of that particular argument, right? Um, so y you're when you're communicating to people to be effective, you have to be aware of what their worldview is. And so you have to understand people and their worldview in order to be effective. Because if you don't, you could be saying things that go against their worldview, and then they're not going to want to listen to you, and they're not going to want to understand you and take it in. And then you have this concept of noise. So in the previous model, we had the channel. So the channel is in both. But what we have added to this transactional model is this concept of noise. And the noise could be in the environment. So when I go to a coffee shop and I'm trying to talk to someone, sometimes I have a hard time because they have blenders going and they have espresso machines going. So that's noise. Sometimes when I'm teaching in class, they're mowing the lawn outside, right? And then I can't hear students and they can't hear me because they've decided to mow the lawn during the school day. So that's example of external noise. And then noise can also be inside your head when you're thinking about something other than what the speaker is telling you, then that's called internal noise. We will get more into looking at noise when we look at the listening chapter, but just for a general view right now, we can see what that is. So with the transactional model, we can see more aspects of communication that are not covered by the previous model. And that's why it was developed, to try to understand communication in a broader view of what's actually happening. All righty, I'm going to move to the next slide now. So we're going to move on to what are the 11 core competencies for effective public speaking. So the first competency is finding a useful topic. If you are giving a speech and the topic is not useful to people, then they're not really motivated to want to listen to what you have to say. The second guideline is to have an engaging introduction. The first thing that you say, people are going to be making decisions about whether or not they want to listen to you. So the introduction is really important. Then you have clear organization. So in order for people to follow you and understand what you're talking about, you have to have your ideas organized in a logical fashion that makes sense to the audience. The next three competencies, the first is well supported. So when you're giving, especially when you're trying to be persuasive or even informative, you want to make sure that you give support for your claims. So your claim is something you believe to be true, and support would be evidence or examples. And we're going to talk more about how to support public speaking in a whole different, there's a whole chapter on it, but this is just a cursory view. And then also closure in your conclusion. So just like the introduction is really important, the conclusion is really important because it's the last thing you say. So people are going to either remember it because it's effective, or they're not going to remember it because it wasn't effective, right? And it's your chance to leave your final impression on your audience. So you want to do a good job with your conclusion. The next thing is to have clear and vivid language. So we have a whole chapter about language use. And the more vivid, in other words, the more it's concrete and it evokes images for people, then the more people are going to visualize what you're talking about, and they're going to get a clearer picture and they're going to understand it better. And it's also more persuasive when you use vivid language. The next three. So having a suitable vocal expression. So you want people to hear what you're saying and you want them to be engaged. So it's important to have some variety in the way that you're talking rather than talking at just a monotone, because if you're at a monotone, people tend to go to sleep. So you want to have variety in the way you're talking. So we have a whole chapter on delivery skills, which talks about ways to try to use your voice to engage people and have them interested in what you have to say. Then we have this corresponding nonverbals. So what's your body doing? Do you have erect posture so people see you as being confident and also helps your voice project when you do that? Or are you slumped, right? Do you look like you're excited and happy to be there, or do you look really nervous and, you know, disengaged or afraid of people? And so those your facial expressions, your gestures with your hands. I can't really show you a lot of gestures unless I put them in front of my face here um, using this video. But when you're live and in front of the whole audience, your whole body is appearing, and so gestures can add to the meaning or support the meaning and make your speech more dynamic. The next thing is adapting to the audience. So as we saw in the transactional model, people have different worldviews and different experiences. So the kind of things that you talk about, you have to make sure that they're relevant for your audience. So you have to adapt to them. So we have a chapter about that topic. Then we have the adept use of visual aids. So I'm using PowerPoint, and you'll have some speeches where you need to use PowerPoint. And then for the demonstration speech, you can use a variety of different types of visual aids. They don't have to be, it doesn't have to be PowerPoint. So if you're demonstrating how to make something, you could bring in those objects and show people how to make it with those objects, right? Okay, and then we have the last one, which is using convincing persuasion. So the 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 semester ends with a major speech of persuasion. And you have to learn how to organize it, put it together, put in appeals for people to believe you and to want to either um, engage in what you're asking them to do or to adjust their attitudes and so on, or maybe just reinforce some attitudes or beliefs that they already have. So that's using convincing persuasion. So those are the 11 competencies. And again, I throw in a few pop quizzes in these presentations sometimes so you can think about it. So now that I finished talking about it, just sit there and see if you can list them. See how many you can list from just having heard what I have to say and then, reading the chapter. How many can you list? Because when you can list them, then you know that you've really internalized the information and you know it. It's yours. All right. Now, the next topic is the four types of speech delivery. So the first is called a manuscript, and that's when you read word for word what you're saying. And these are typically reserved for formal events like the president's address to the nation that they typically do once a year, or other kinds of really important events where the exact wording of what's being said is super, super important. They're not as engaging as the extemporaneous, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And so they're not really the preferred type of speeches to do in the United States and in most business culture um, around the world these days. What's more preferred is extemporaneous. But before we get to that, I want to do the others. Okay, so that's a fully written out speech where people just read it. And I don't want you to be doing those type of speeches in our class. Okay, I want you to do extemporaneous. So the next type of speech on here, if you move to the right, is the memorized speech, and that's where you write everything down and then you memorize it the way an actor memorizes their lines. It's harder to do than an extemporaneous speech, and you're not required to memorize your speeches in our class. there are students that are really good at it. Some of the students have been in theater in high school. They're great at it, or you might be in theater right now, and that's your forte, and you want to do it, you can. The disadvantage to memorizing your speech is that if you suddenly forget a line, you get thrown off, and it makes people in class, in my class that I've seen, they get really nervous and they have a hard time recovering because they don't have any kind of prompts. When actors on stage forget a line, there's someone on the side and the actor says line, and the person on the sideline has the script and reads them the line, and they get the line, and then they can keep going, right? So when you're doing a speech in class, you don't have that. And so that's why it's not required, and it's not the preferred way to speak anyway. You can't adjust it. So, if something comes up and you want to say something different, but you memorize it a different way, you can't make any adjustments. You can't adjust it to the audience. So that's another reason why it's not preferred for public speaking classes. The next type there at the bottom is on the left is the impromptu speech, and that's when you're making up the speech on the spot. So if you get called on in class, that's and you talk, that's an impromptu speech. If you're at a meeting and your boss calls on you and you talk, that's an impromptu speech. And there's some public speaking teachers that will give people slips of paper with a topic and have them do an impromptu speech in class, but I don't do it because we just don't have enough time. We have so many speeches to cover. But it's a great skill to have of people that are good at it. There's competitions for impromptu speaking that people engage in, and it can be a really fun thing to do. The last type, the most important type, the type that we're going to be focused on in our class is the extemporaneous speech. So an extemporaneous speech has two types of outlines for in public speaking classes. And the first is the preparation outline, which is word for word what you would like to say. But then you take that preparation outline and turn it into a speaking outline, which is a lot like PowerPoints. It's just keywords or key phrases. And that's what you use to prompt you to remember what to say. When you prepare, when you finish preparing your speech, first you write it out word for word, and I'm going to give you very specific guidelines for the preparation outline, and it's going to be a very specific type of organizational structure. When you finish that, then you're going to take that and you turn it into the speaking outline, and then you're going to rehearse at home using the speaking outline. And the more you rehearse, the better job you're going to do. What I don't want is anyone coming to class with their preparation outline and reading it word for word. That's not extemporaneous speaking. And it's not the preferred kind of speaking in most speech situations in the United States, because when you're reading word for word, you cannot make eye contact. All right. So that's why extemporaneous speeches allow you to make eye contact, engage with the audience, read the audience. When you're reading the audience and you're getting energy from them too, it kind of motivates you around what you want to say, and you can make the adjustments to your speech when you master the art of extemporaneous. So that's what we're going to do in our class, is the extemporaneous kind of speeches. All right. So here's your final quiz that you can do at home before you do one for a grade. So what are the 3 benefits of public speaking? What are the 11 competencies? And what are the 4 types of delivery? All righty. And also remember the difference between the two models. Okay, the linear model and the transactional model. What's the difference between those two? All righty. That's all the information that I have to share with you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in class on Wednesday, and I'm so sorry that I had this family emergency. As I said, the good news is my mom's doing well. She's 100. She had another heart attack, and she's recovering, and she'll be released this week, and I'm getting help tomorrow, so that I don't have to miss any more classes to deal with that family emergency. Okay? All right. So enjoy the material, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.